Our hymn selection for today is hymn number 63, and commonly known as "O Heavenly Word," and probably not one of the better known of our Advent hymns, but again, that's the joy of having the opportunity to meditate on a different one each day. This particular set of lyrics comes from a 10th century anonymous Latin manuscript that was discovered and was translated by a very prolific translator named John Mason Neale. This particular set of lyrics is based on the beginning of the Gospel of John, which in many of our churches is read as an introduction on the Christmas Eve service and is almost always read on Christmas Day itself. Now, many of the traditions, our Christmas traditions, are based on those first chapter or first two chapters of our Gospels. That's where we hear the story of Jesus. And two of them start out with a genealogical family tree where the ancestry of Jesus is traced back through either Mary or Joseph to the ancestors of the Jewish tradition that have come before him, to King David, to Jesse, to those names that we hear when we hear descriptions of who Jesus was as a human being. However, that unusual gospel, the Gnostic gospel, the Gospel of John, has a little bit of a different way of telling that story. It's outside of the idea of human ancestors, and it talks about Jesus's divinity and where that comes from. Although we find, as we hear that gospel, that it doesn't really come from anywhere. It just always was. You're probably familiar with it, but I'm going to read you a little bit of that starting chapter of the Gospel of John. It starts out with, "In the beginning, there was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. The same being was in the beginning with God. All things were made by him, and without him was not anything made that was made. In him was life, and the life was the light of humankind. And the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness did not comprehend it." That concept of light and darkness can be a very powerful metaphor. Darkness is vanquished by even the smallest amount of light. Even a small pinhole of light coming into a space makes that space no longer dark. Darkness is either completely absolute or it doesn't really exist. It's countered by the light. We hear several different metaphors within these verses of hymns, light and darkness being just one of them. And so while this hymn is built on simply 4 short verses and a doxology, there's a lot of depth that we can go into. And so let's do that now together. Take a moment, take a deep breath, settle into your space a little bit, whether it's dark or light. O heavenly Word, eternal light, begotten of the Father's might, who in these later days was born for blessing to a world forlorn. Pour light upon us from above, and fire our hearts with ardent love, that as we hear thy truth today, all wrong desires may burn away. And when as judge, thou drawest nigh the secrets of our hearts to try to recompense each hidden sin and bid the saints their reign begin. Oh, let us not, for evil past, be driven from thy face at last, but with thy saints for evermore behold thee, love thee, and adore. To God the Father, God the Son, and God the Spirit, ever one, praise, honor, might, and glory be from age to age, eternally. So the questions that I've been pondering as a result of the contemplation of this hymn is, which of those many metaphors and descriptions really speaks to your heart during this particular Advent season? And second question, how did these different descriptors, these different ways of understanding God and Jesus, how do they enhance your relationship with Jesus? And finally, how does John's introduction of Jesus feel different from the traditional story? And more importantly, I think, how do you feel about that? Do you have a preference? Do you prefer hearing about Jesus's eternity, who was and is to come? Or are you more comfortable thinking about him as a human child, God incarnate coming to our world? Spend a little time thinking about that. But for now, I will bid you a goodbye. Hope the rest of your day is fruitful and peaceful. And I look forward to seeing you again tomorrow when we continue our discussion. Take care and God bless.